Thank you all for coming today, and it's the first session on a Sunday morning, so quite impressive that we've got such a large crowd here. So as we've just heard, this is going to be about AI production workflows, and as audiences consume more content across more platforms, media companies are turning to AI to meet the demand for speed, scale, and personalisation. But new AI workflows and solutions are doing more than just automating the workflows. They're being used across the entire content lifecycle, from the ideation and creation right the way through to distribution and consumption. So this session is going to look right across the board at the application of AI in creative workflows, from the germ of the idea right the way through to the content storage architectures and a lot more besides. So we're going to set the scene with each of the panelists giving a brief scene setter from their perspective, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion and some audience questions at the end if we have time. So let's get started then. Joining me on stage are Amaric Legal, the VP for Global Sales, Marketing for Media and Telecoms at Kaltura, David Colcioni, VP of Product Marketing at StorJ, and Duncan Beattie, Marketing Developing Manager at Tuxera. So everything starts with an idea, so the logical place to start actually is with Amaric.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for having us here. So first, I also very impressed to see so many people on a Sunday morning at IBC, so well done, guys. So let me say a few words about Kaltura and the way we see our contribution on this topic, because obviously when we talk about AI, contribution, workflow, and storage, which is something that will be detailed by my colleague on stage, everything is about content. So Kaltura is a US-based company, from 19 years now, long time. We are really specialized about, how can we make sure that the content for our customers, which are like telco and media broadcasters, is being exposed in the better way for the audience. So obviously AI now is playing a role on top of that, and this is what we used to say. It's like, the streaming race that we see right now is not about the most content. I mean, it was a time like content is king. Everyone was trying to gather as much as they can about content, which obviously brings some storage challenges. But it's more about like, who knows what the viewers want to watch next. And what we see from this is like the last study is like, most of you know that you have so many platforms, so many content that you spend nearly more than 10 minutes now to find the content you want to watch. And that's a big issue, because that's also generates churn in the way that people are watching the content. So let's see, during the panel, how AI can contribute to make it more, personal, and make sure that we avoid that, this is not the right content. This is the right content for the right audience at the right format, okay? And the right format is also something we see with the, I'm getting old now, but when I look at my children, the Gen Z, and I'm always surprised when I try, to meet with them and to say, let's watch a movie on the TV or something. They don't care, because unfortunately or not, they watch some short content. So how can we also embrace, and also for the telco and the broadcaster, this kind of new consumption? And AI obviously will have a big role to play in terms of, being some kind of automate process to create this kind of short content on top of the long tail content. So I'm not going to say more, because I think you will have more questions to say what can be done. So I will give the mic to my colleague.
So I'm Dave Colantoni from StorJ. It's actually StorJ, not storage, in case you're wondering. We were talking about that earlier. So we actually provide a decentralized storage architecture that's globally available and globally accessible through storage nodes throughout the world. So we feel like we have a very unique perspective on how hyperscaler infrastructure is failing AI teams because of that unique architecture that we provide. Basically, we're able to not have the user or the AI engines going to the data. We're bringing the data to the user. And that's a really important part of our different, in our technology, where we can be globally accessible, and we can utilize that global accessibility for us to bring performance and use AI in order to do things faster. So basically, why now? Why now? And why is the AI infrastructure and what's the bottleneck? So data center systems, they are basically projected at 42% growth in 2025. Our decentralized infrastructure is purpose-built for this. It's no longer niche in its essential in order to bring AI infrastructure to the forefront. This means that we also provide GPUs, and GPU shortages are also a big problem in the industry. We actually have a GPU content marketplace, and we're also spinning up and introducing at the show compute alongside of our storage, so that in a co-location you can actually do very fast renders or AI processing alongside our storage. This means that we're really positioned to help the AI industry in that sort of processing and storage component of it. So we actually have three different approaches to this in the way we are working with AI. One is, of course, cloud compute. Like I said, we have GPU compute, now we have CPU compute. We also provide a very robust and globally accessible distributed architecture for object storage. And we also provide file accessibility through a product we call Object Mount. This all combined really not only works for production workflows, but also helps AI workflows be very efficient. This means that our decentralized infrastructure and architecture can help assist AI workflows. It also allows for AI native storage via MCP, and it gives everyone better economics, gives proven adoption, and it really does provide an architecture for AI training, inference learning, semantic searching, and all the things that are emerging in AI. So.
Thank you very much. So the great thing about these panels is that such great different viewpoints turn up, and our viewpoint from where we stand with Tuxera, particularly my viewpoint, is 20 years experience in the industry, looking after media companies, looking after clients, managing storage products and creating storage products. And I've kind of looked at this from where we stand at the moment, where we have traditional content creation, what the leads of AI and machine learning are within that content, and then the additional load that's placed on the storage platforms, particularly on-premise storage, and also moving into the cloud. And really looking at that kind of list, we're looking at the sort of HD files and predictable data growth, and that's a kind of traditional way of working. Whereas AI and ML Sunday morning, it's really pushing those and changing the way these media files are accessed and the way that they're looked at and the way they're handled. Ultra large files that we're getting with virtual sets. These are huge, huge files. And the data growth is exponential at the moment. You mentioned that 42%, and it's true. It's just growing hugely. Hybrid and cloud environments and GPU there, and we've got concurrent AI and human interaction. And that's a real key feature, is how do you get the AI interaction, which is completely automated and just pummels the storage, working with editors who need fast turnaround, they need to bring files back, they need to work on assets. How do we sit those together? And then cold becomes hot. So what I mean is that, traditionally in media production, you have assets that are marked as ready, delivered, archived off, and then they might come back in 6 months when the client was changing. AI is going to trawl through that for data gathering and make them instantly hot again. So how do you work with that? So this is the load that we've thought is coming on to the storage. So it's got to be scalable, geographically diverse. We want to make sure things are in different places with cloud providers. And then on to what does it mean for storage? Well, how shared storage can assist AI is providing fast central storage, reliable scalability, and then how does AI help storage? What storage pressures that AI are going to put on storage, then how do we use AI to help that storage as well? So we look at it from two angles. So where do we fit into the conversation? Well, we manufacture, we make a very, very high performance SMB file server. And this is used in cloud environments and virtual machines, on-prem storage, in clusters. And SMB is a protocol that is used absolutely everywhere, like S3, right? So what do? So it's an enterprise-grade server. It's very, very modern coding. It removes these performance overheads. It's huge performance, which is what people need. Looking at the previous slide, you look at AI and demanding 8K workflows and trawling. This, we can deliver to a single workstation 20 gig a second over SMB. right? So it's hugely powerful and probably more powerful than any other protocol out there, but it's just SMB. So that's where we sit, and it's a really, really important part of the flow that goes with creativity and cloud environments, and that's it. So it's my quick introduction.
Brilliant. I think that really sets the scene, and we're going to go into a lot more detail and do some real-world examples and questions around that. So given that it is all about the content, the starting part of the content, so Amrik, can you give us some real examples of how AI is changing the way that the broadcasters and content and telecoms operators have considered working in the last few years in some depth, some real-world examples?
Yeah, and I will come back to what Duncan just said before. Like, I like the idea about the cold content, it's becoming hot content, because what we see at the broadcaster level and the people we are working with is like nearly, 60%, 70% of the cost of the cost of the budget of the broadcaster is about content, So they have this huge database and asset that they would like to promote, they would like to upsell, they would like to create campaign. And one of the examples is one of our customers in APAC. I can name it obviously, but he was, before he was doing the editorial job, like the basic stuff, but like I want to create a campaign, create some kind of documentary on sports or animals, whatever. So you need to extract the content, you need to recover the content from the storage, you need to edit the content, you need to enrich the metadata, you need to do all this kind of process, to be able to expose the content. And also you need to decide the way you will expose the content on the front end, because at the end, what is, really important is the way the consumer and the viewer and the eyeball will consume the content. So they were doing that manually, also with the team of editorial and marketing, and we've been providing them some kind of AI tool to do all this kind of process, to metadata enrichment, localization with dubbing, subtitling, also to give the content, more access to many people. It's in Asia, so obviously they have different languages. And what we see from now is like they optimize nearly from 70%, the time to market to launch a new, what they call a campaign. So before it was taking between 1 to 1.5 weeks, with a bunch of different skills to make it happen. The people are still there, so that's quite important. The AI did not replace the people. The people are still there because you still need to have what I call the human touch, the human check to make sure that everything is happening. But all the heavy lifting about, this kind of process from, working on the content, has been reduced by 70%. So the benefit is a bit about cost, obviously, but it's also about time to market, because now they can do A/B testing to launch more campaigns and to see what kind of content, and they're doing that from their long tail content. So what kind of content can be promoted, sell, or and create engagement with the audience. So that's a big shift for them. They are quite happy, and I think we will see more and more use case coming in the future.
And are they happy with what AI is doing? Because obviously AI is about training a model.
Yeah.
How's the model trained, and does it work from them from an editorial point of view? Are they convinced about it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first test was a bit, adding metadata is quite simple from today in AI. When it comes to dubbing and subtitling, you still find some mistakes. So, this is more where the model were improving, and we see very good result today with very specific language. So they're quite happy with that, because now they can, promote this content to a larger audience in their country, which, have multiple language. On the metadata itself, obviously they are super happy, because they can see that more metadata means also more way to look and search for the content in the recommendation. So again, content storage, content exposure, and content consumption. That's the 3 pillars of this business actually. So they're very happy with that, and also they see that they can create different kind of content. So it's more like a trial. They do like short content, trailers. We have some kind of tools also that can create chapters. So when you have a documentary, you can create this short clip of 1 minute that maybe you can post to the social network to promote your content, your campaign. So they kind of moving to this kind of new loop, also embracing with the Gen Z way of consumption. So for now they're quite happy. It's not large scale. It's like the beginning, but hopefully we'll see that happen in the next coming months. Yeah.
Brilliant. And sort of moving to the next part of the chain, the creative side's quite complex for AI. What about distribution and sort of the usage side of it? Is that more binary for AI, or how does that work?
Is that for me? Or
Yeah.
So I think AI will have a very big impact on distribution because, well, I guess I'll put it in the storage context, right? So if you're creating DCPs or something like that, and you're doing multiple distribution of different versions of a particular movie or production, you're going to have to eventually render that. You're going to have to be able to utilize very quick resources. So if you think about a decentralized architecture where you can use AI in order to go out and pick the fastest way to render something, AI can go out and say, oh, well, okay, I need to render this really quickly. What's the fastest way I'm going to do this? Oh, these nodes are available to me. I'm going to make them and utilize them to render them faster. And it can also doing that can also create all those different versions that you might need to deliver. So from the content distribution side, yes, it can help us obviously accelerate that. It can also help with QC in being able to look at different variables that might come up in a production that were missed by a human eye, so you can train it in order to look for certain things before it actually gets distributed. So yeah, it's a very important part of that part of the production chain.
The more and more content comes up, you touched on this as well. How is this storage environment? How are they changing? And are we just storing more and more content and more duplicates of the same content? How's that technology evolving?
Yeah, well, deduping all your content will be a big thing in the future. Imagine there's these huge archives that may have multiple copies of the same thing, multiple copies of a particular clip or scene or whatever. Imagine if you could take AI and train your content library to look for duplicates. You can do this today on your iPhone. It's looking at pictures and it's automatically saying, oh, you have duplicates of this. But imagine, 20, 25, 30 petabytes of content that needs to be trained. Storage costs money. And not only that, having storage, that's actually monetization that you could utilize for the future. So you could create content with your dormant archive. So using AI and and having the ability to train that content to look for duplication, but also then, we can talk about this later, how you're going to monetize that content could be an important part of it too. So now you're reducing your storage costs. You're able to produce content from that storage because it's all been trained. And in a broadcast sense, like you were saying, you can actually create stories with it too. Maybe there's a historical footage of breaking news that you can reference and it's making recommendations on what it was like before to what it is now for that breaking news event. So yeah, there's a lot of uses for it, I guess, as you're interacting with your storage.
Yeah, and I agree. You're talking about the production workflows as well, and I saw a statistic somewhere that as storage becomes easier and cameras become higher quality and cheaper, people are recording more and more and more. For every minute of content, the number of rushes or B-roll has gone up and up and up, and that never gets deleted. So from a production side, from a creation thing, what's your view on that, Americ?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a good example of what we see on the market right now. We have also some customers coming to us, with outside of the traditional content that we are used to, like the live, linear, catch-up, and all the OTT providers. Now we see a more like what we call user-generated content, and now they come to this kind of library, which is huge. Last time the customer came to us and said, I have something like 2 million assets to migrate. I say that 2 million assets. I mean, Netflix, if you look at Netflix today, it's roughly like 13,000 content available. So I was like, what kind of content do you have? And looking at it, you realize that indeed now they need to embrace this kind of new content. So, and they need to store it for different reasons, because they need also to make sure that you get, each people get more personalized content. So it's not like, so I think this is very important to have, technology with AI about cold storage and being able to bring the content as soon as possible on the platform. So we see that happening, to be honest, and more customers also in the telco space are asking for this kind of, new short form 916 instead of 69. And when it will come, obviously we will have to have question like, how do we make sure that we optimize the storage? How do we make sure that the backend that Kaltura is providing to their customer is bringing the content as soon as possible, with less latency as possible? And how do we make sure that this AI is maybe able to, to discuss between both systems to make sure that the content, is always having the most relevant content in terms of personalization. So I think all the workflow from storage to personalization at the end in the distribution model will make sense, and AI will obviously help from that. We are still early stage. We see some kind of innovation around that. I'm not saying that the AI is able to really provide you the content that you like at each time, but I think from the full journey, more and more with this new kind of content, and that will imply huge storage and capacity to deliver them the best way, AI will have to play a role in that, yeah.
And that ties nicely into what you were saying. So you've recorded your content, you've created your content, you've stored it.
Yeah.
And all of that really, whether it's the finished item, the finished program, or it's the rushes, that's an archive. Your archive is forever growing.
Yeah, yeah.
And you touched on how do you use AI to turn that big chunk of stuff in storage into your active archive so you can monetize it very quickly?
Well, I think you've got a lot of storage systems and a lot of archive systems storing that content, and with the addition of AI, then as I mentioned earlier, you've got the ability to be able to trawl through old archives very, very quickly. And you touched on deduping. If you can train AI to look at 4 or 5 different versions it's found and then work out the best one, it can trawl through video way, way quicker than humans can, and it can spot problems, and it can say, well, that's great, but halfway through the QC process, I spotted that 4 frames were gone. Now, normally you'd have to sit and watch it and go, oh, there's 4 frames missing, right? So that can speed that up. But I think that we also have to consider the ecological impact of AI. How much GPU usage and how much power is that taking to go and spot those files? So anything that storage providers can do to try and reduce that economic or the ecological impact with the power consumption should be done. People are generating all these content for TikToks, and they're just generating AI videos and throwing on TikTok, but somewhere in the world that's using a huge amount of power.
Yeah.
And it's using storage because it's got to store these files for a while and then they go again. So I think that's also an important part of the puzzle. There was a quote I heard from one of these panel sessions. I'm not going to take credit for it, but at the moment I think that AI is a bit of a teenage phase, right? So it can be pretty good, it can do some really good stuff, but occasionally it gets a bit weird and a bit stroppy and goes off, and it can just think I'm doing a great job and suddenly using huge amounts of resources that you hadn't planned for. Mm-hmm. In traditional post and traditional production inside companies, the CFOs and the production managers have planned for their storage. They know how much power it's taking, how much storage they need, they can plan for it. But now it can just explode overnight without anyone realizing, and I think that's also part of the puzzle too.
And earlier on, you said AI, ML.
Oh,
we
yeah.
probed that. Where is the barrier between AI and ML in this world?
Yeah, well, you've got generic AI, you've got machine learning, you've got agentic AI, where you've got AIs talking to each other.
So give us a 1 minute sort of AI 101.
Well, generic AI is of course, if you're in Premiere, for example, you need a little bit of edit footage. It can add some little bit of footage on the end, and you can in your phone you can extract and take things out of photos, and then the AI itself is looking at content and trying to find and find things you're looking for. The machine learning, I think, is quite important because that is understanding processes, and from our point of view, and potentially from yours as well, is spotting traffic patterns and how can we optimize traffic. How can we optimize the routes to make sure that people are getting to the data quick enough? And I think that's really important. And then business AI, or business intelligence, is just making sure that those investments are sensible and are bringing back true value to the customers investing in these platforms.
So that's a baseline for it.
Yeah.
Where do you think the infrastructure is? You mentioned, one of you mentioned that there's a shortage of GPU. So people are necessarily not going to jump straight into one solution or the other. What would your advice be to companies who are just coming new to this? You said it was a teenager anyway.
It's been teenager.
So how does somebody get in and use this infrastructure to the best benefit for their business? Is it a hybrid solution? Is it all in with cloud? Is it all in with private cloud? Who wants to start with that?
I say they go to cloud storage. That's my vote.
How would they do it? So I come to you and say, I've got this billion terabytes of stuff, and I want to put it in cloud storage, save myself money, be more sustainable. How, in real world terms, how does that work?
Well, it's actually there's two problems. How well, I guess I'll put it in, there's three different things I would think about. One, how important is security to them? The other one is, how am I going to get all this content to the cloud? That's a real big challenge. And then the third one is cost. And so if you're going to put, 10, 20 petabytes of content, if you can get it to the cloud efficiently, you really want to make sure that you're going to be able to monetize that in a way that you can make it accessible, but it's also cost effective, it's retrievable. A lot of cloud infrastructure companies today, you have to pay a lot of money to retrieve your content. So that is a little bit of a difference between what we do. We do have an active archive, so our archive is readily accessible all the time. It doesn't have to be rehydrated. That might be an important factor for someone that wants to monetize their content, or if it's a, maybe it's a local broadcast station that has a lot of content over the years. They digitized it. They want to put it in the cloud so they can modernize their infrastructure. They want to obviously monetize that and retrieve it in order to create content. So there's a number of different factors. I think those are probably the three that you want to look out for. There's another sort of subset of performance and how are you going to access that content if you want to edit it, for instance, directly from the cloud. There's products that can do that today. We have one ourselves. There's so many different variables. I'd say that's about how I would start doing it.
And Amrit, you're at the creation stage or the content stage. Does that sound practical from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I will come back to what Duncan just said before. I think each time we come to a customer that, obviously AI is something fancy right now. They want to do this kind of POC, but what we try to see is like, what is the return on investment? I think that's the real big point on that, because I mean, when you try to, and I have some, I remember a discussion with a customer that was looking to do some real-time dubbing, for multiple language, for kind of a diaspora channel across the world. So, but when you look at the cost, it's quite still expensive, and even if you compare to a human being doing that, so it's always the same. It's like you need to be, the rationale between the complexity of what it will be, including to your system, the benefit that you will get. So it's obviously data-driven, like what kind of, and you need to measure that. Like if you think that you will create more metadata, more personalization, do you really have more consumption of your content, and that's exactly the use case I was describing before, like to do A/B testing of you launch a kind of package, maybe with some new traders that capture from the cold storage using AI and metadata enrichment. So the big point is really about the return on investment. And the second point also is to make sure that trust and governance is aligned. When you touch the content, some people want to say, "Oh, I will create my own traders," but do you have the right from the studio to create your own traders? And I will add metadata, but do you have the right to do that? And the way you will expose it would be compliant to the way that the studio, because at some point of the content we are talking storage, we are talking distribution. But there's people producing the content, there's creation, there's human beings still yet. So that's always the equation that we try to see with the customer. What kind of benefit your end user will get from that? Maybe they won't see the benefit, by the way, because it's just creating stickiness to a services and being able, if you remember, the 15 minutes or 10 minutes, to look for content. So maybe we'll avoid that, so you reduce your churn, and we want our customer to be more profitable at the end. But coming back to the infrastructure of AI, so look at the cost, make sure that it's data-driven, to make sure that what you do is really, with some benefits that maybe you can measure or not, but you have some KPI that you can check at the end user level, and make sure that you do that, with trust and governance, that everything is compliant to, and in full respect about this industry, because that's also very important, I think.
Yeah. And Duncan, you mentioned earlier about AI, using AI for different things. Do you think there's a world where AI could be used to make this sort of self-funding? You're talking about costs, so the AI itself finds a way of making the business model work by using different ways of moving the content around more efficiently, less storage.
Yeah, I think so. And I'd like to touch on what your slightly earlier question about where do you start with storage. And in my history of 20 years of providing storage for media and media companies, it spanned small startups where you got 3 guys in a small flat in London trying to create a creative company. You've got broadcasters, you've got live events, you've got animation. And I think one of the key things you have to remember is that a lot of this creative content is very personal. right? So wherever this content goes, the customer needs to feel safe. They need to make sure it's being looked after. And if you're introducing AI into that mix, where is it going to be placed? Is it going to be publicly available? Is it going to be private AI? Is it going to be private cloud? Is it going to be public cloud? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be on-prem storage? You know, of course, the movie studios want to keep things safe and secure. So they're invariably going to keep a lot of things in-house, in their studios, to make sure it doesn't escape, because that is commercial gold for them. You know, you don't want the new Marvels to be leaked, etc. So where is AI going to sit? You know, is it going to run internally in this kind of air-gapped environment, in which case people are going to write their own? But they still need access to strong, good storage. You know, we don't make storage, but we make a protocol that works with a lot of storage companies and is embedded in a lot of storage companies. So we have to make sure that we're working with their tools and that their tools will work with us. And I think, particularly the machine learning and AI side of it, it's going to put pressure on that storage and the infrastructure. And to make it commercially viable, that's when you control the archives. You can pull back gems that you thought had lost. It potentially could be used, the generic AI of it could be used to retouch old movies nice and quickly. But there are a lot of skilled people out there who retouch films. And it's a really great art to be able to retouch a movie and make it look new. And we've all watched something and we've gone, well, it's definitely AI. It doesn't feel quite comfortable, you know. So we've got to look after the creatives. We've got to make sure that they can also use the storage and keep that talent pool. And that's vital part of this. That's why I said with the Stroppy Teenager, we've got to be careful what it does and don't let it go straight to broadcast, because it could do something quite odd. You know, you've got to contain it somewhat.
So how do we contain it yet help the organisational and cultural change I think we need? Because we know AI is coming, ML, it's all here, and it is here to stay. But
yes,
I think there needs to be an organisational, cultural change. How do we drive that as technologists?
There's got to be a level of respect for what AI is and how powerful it is, but there's also got to be a level of where we trust to place it and what we trust it to do. Because, like I said, you could end up with some strange results that you didn't expect or didn't want if you let it loose in the wrong place. So I think we've got to respect it. I think it's a very powerful thing. It's definitely here to stay. You know, it's been the buzzword for I don't know how many years now, and it will continue to be so. But looking at sort of the creative content side, the cloud storage side, where do we place things? How do we optimize things? How do we help it look after the industry? I think that's key. And monetizing definitely, but I think trust is a real thing. So from our side, you know, what we're looking to do with it, we've got to make sure it's respecting people's data, even though we're looking at the data to use MI to learn about the data. We've got to respect that privacy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so let's round it up with some real world examples, some specifics of how perhaps your individual bits, either your customers or your experience, has really benefited either a time to air, showing my age, time to air or time to platform, time to release, or it's reduced the cost, or it's done something different. So maybe start with you, Amaric, from the creation side. A real example of how that's worked.
So I think I was mentioning this example about time to release, time to market, about this kind of content, but the real example, to be very transparent, are not coming yet, because it's, I mean, you know, last year IBC AI was buzzing. Now the solutions are ready. So no, we will have to wait a little bit before all the customers embrace this new technology. So what we see when you do some kind of POC or testing with our customer is really about, you know, something they like about, you know, AI is how can I build a process in AI, you know, using from the content management system to the exposure of the content that will create stickiness, you know, and we have launched in Kaltura something called TV Genie, you know. So TV Genie is the new way to give you a recommendation, you know. So it's a kind of, and we are even showcasing now an avatar. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm too old to talk with this avatar. Maybe my kids will love it. But the point is really to say, like, how can I make sure that, and again, this is very linked, like this huge database asset that I have in storage and that cost, you know, and maybe will be optimized in terms of cold storage plus distribution and everything. How do I make sure that, you know, I make the most benefit of it, you know? So how do I make sure that this AI will support the fact that my consumer will look for my content, and when they look for my content, it creates stickiness. So if it creates stickiness, it's like, you know, no churn. And if there is no churn, no, you need to think about the model of broadcast and telco when we come about TV. You know, the cost of acquisition is quite heavy. From the television, are you zapping on linear television in the past from channel 1 to channel 2, or on the SVOD platform, on everything? So really the challenge is to say like how AI will create and will help me to create this stickiness. And stickiness is like an habit. It's very difficult to create an habit. But when it becomes to be an habit, because you feel that your media, entertainment, short content, long content, documentary services is really designed for you, then you don't have any reason to change. So at some point, this is the big challenge for them. So all the use case, and I'm not giving you, and I understand precise example, is to say, how do you design this workflow using AI from metadata enrichment, personalization, content exposure, to make sure that at some point you really create hyper-personalization. And hyper-personalization is exactly what we see on TikTok. And I mean, we are all scary how many times our kids are spending scrolling on this. But this is just done because they always have content which is supposed to be personalized to them.
Yeah.
And how can we achieve this using AI on the traditional broadcast media entertainment domain? So that's really the question we are working on with the customer. Not a simple one, because indeed you have you need to take care of the organization. We were talking about the people. Maybe sometimes they need to change skills, being more not a curator or editorial team to more like a marketing vision team. So that's going to take a bit and a while, but I'm quite convinced that maybe next year we'll have some precise examples to give you.
Brilliant. And so, David, sort of workflow for you, the sort of proudest workflow, proudest use case from your perspective.
I think it's what I was talking about before. Since we are storage, and we do provide infrastructure to run AI on top of that storage, I really think it is around content monetization of your archive. And there's so many things that you can utilize with AI. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. I'm fascinated with this aspect ratio thing, making things that were formerly shot in film and making it 4K and using AI to make it actually look real and modernize it. That's amazing. So I really think as part of the infrastructure, it will be this rehydration of your archive content and then presenting it to different audiences, but using modern AI techniques, agentic AI, for context, in order to assembling libraries for a particular genre that can be done automatically with AI, be able to tell it, you can train it that way. So that's our participation in it right now. And I don't know, we'll see how the future holds, but.
You might not like this question in a way. It's a supplementary to that. Sort of, you've got your content. You mentioned the aspect ratio. Do we need to store the 16:9 and the 9:16, or can we just store the essence once, the high res, the 8K file, and then use a small metadata file to describe how we want it displayed? So the storage doesn't go up exponentially. You have the essence and then the instruction.
I'd say that's the right
Is that
thing.
the way it's going?
Right, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't, there's so much content being created. Doesn't bother me. There's so much content being created. You talked about shooting ratios earlier. So yeah, no, that's probably the right way to do it.
And I think that's probably the sustainability thing.
Absolutely.
One company I used to work at as a distributor, a big distributor, we worked out that for some of our larger programs, we had 179 different versions. And when you compare the versions, there was about 1% difference. Yet it was 179 versions stored, which was crazy. So I'll come back now to you for your sort of real-world example of what's the best workflow, best use case.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to add a comment to your comment. I'm a little bit old school, so I like to film horizontal, right? So, we watch TV in horizontal, and we see a news story, and we see that in the middle of TV. And well, actually, if you have the phone that way, you get so much more detail.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I get constantly told off by my marketing department. Sorry, Claire. Because I should be filming things vertically, right? Because everyone's watching it vertically. So I have to remember to do that. But it's, you've got that mix. So to be able to automatically generate that content, and then I think where AI will kick in with that is to be able to naturally move that block around to keep because if you've got a horizontal 16:9 footage, you've got lots of detail. So where's it going to keep the focus? So that I think AI could really help with that to learn to make it even more reachable. So sorry, side comment there.
No.
What we're doing with AI is that at the moment we are keeping an eye on the stroppy teenager and looking and understanding what we can do with AI inside our storage to help how we could use it in our storage, or not in our storage, but in our client storage systems with our protocol servers. But what we are concentrating on is how we can help people who are using AI. So we work in oil and gas, and we work in medical, and we work in HPC and supercomputing. And of course, supercomputing is full of AI in very different ways, lots of data gathering, not for media. And that places huge stresses on the performance. So what we are doing is concentrating and making a standard protocol SMB at the moment the best it can possibly be. You know, it's the most efficient one you can get hold of outside of Microsoft, probably in some places a little bit faster. But it can be placed in Linux servers, and it can be placed in the cloud, in containers, on premise. So wherever people feel that data is safe, we can then help that, if they're using this protocol, to be as efficient as possible, and reducing sometimes the number of servers required to deliver this protocol. So we're doing a lot to help the AI industry in performance, whilst we're keeping a very close eye on how we could use it to embellish what we do underneath, bearing in mind a lot of what we carry and we pass through our protocol is very, very confidential. So, yeah, there's sort of two sides to that.
Okay. And just to round it off, it wouldn't be content everywhere if we didn't look to the future.
Yeah.
So let's look to when the stroppy teenager has left home. Let's say 2030.
Finally.
Finally. So let's say that's 2030. What 30-second tip would you give to media companies and others today that they can start preparing so that when the stroppy teenager leaves, they're ready to go and they can make best use of this spare bedroom?
I think, gym or something, I don't know, man cave.
Yeah.
I think just making sure that they are really understanding what they want to do with it. I think as a company grows and understanding where AI is going to fit in their production workflow to help them monetize and give the best service they can to their clients, what will that involve? What will it involve in terms of resources, capacity, hardware, workflows and things like that. So as it matures, there's going to be lots of companies all using AI, of course. And how is that going to affect them?
Okay. David, sort of 30 seconds, what can people do to prepare?
Good question. I guess don't forget the creative. You know, I think the human element of it is the most important piece of all this. AI is a means to an end, only to accelerate the creative. So that's my advice to them. There's so many stories to be told. Don't forget that. And utilize AI to make the stories better.
Okay. And that leads nicely on to 30 seconds from you, Amric.
Yeah, I will also say that that's quite important, that maybe if AI, even in the content production, will support some kind of new form. I mean, we can have some kind maybe of, interactive movie. I mean, I'm talking about personalization. So maybe at some point we will have one pivot table and we'll be able to, to extract this same format and the way you are going to watch it and view it will be different for me and the kids. So everything is, I think, hyper personalization. If the media and provider, they want to stay on the game about the media consumption with this big platform, and I'm not blaming them, by the way, but they really need to have this hyper personalization, using AI to make it more personal. Because when you create an habit, a habit is really hard to quit. So when you create an habit, then you can extend your business. So hyper personalization, I think, will be the key word for the next few years.
So I think it's a perfect way to round it off. We've got the stroppy teenager out of the house, and we're ready for the future.
Yeah.
So thank you to Duncan, David, and Amric, and a round of applause for them for joining me today.